Israel is undoubtedly a melting pot, mixing Jews from different places and thereby changing their culture. They can now relinquish the prohibition on eating kitniot on Passover thanks to the breakdown of barriers between different ethnic groups. Israel is also undoubtedly a new phenomenon with power to influence the identity and outlook of the Jews who live there. On the one hand, Israel allows Jews to live tribal lives and easily strengthen old customs and traditions. On the other, it also makes it easier for them to break old habits because there is no tangible threat to their collective identity as Jews. This ease is often expressed through their brazen displays of self-confidence in renewing traditions or in abolishing traditions whose time has passed.
Hello, my name is Shmuel Rosner, and I'm Senior Fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute, JPPI. We have with us today Avinoam Bar-Yosef, the founding director and the president of JPPI. Hello, Avinoam. Thank you for coming.
Hi. Good morning.
Avinoam, you were born as Jewish, and you are now what we call in our book Jewish Israeli. So what are you really? Are you Jewish or Israeli or both? How does it work for an immigrant?
Well, immigration in general is a trauma. But no doubt that I feel first Jewish. And the story is simple. I had to give it much thought because since I was born as a kid in Bucharest, this question was raised to me by my father, actually, how you feel. And he taught me to make clear that I am a Romanian Jew. And he said we are Romanians because we live here. All our responsibilities as citizens are to Romania, but we are also Jewish, and you'll never forget it. My father was a Zionist, and for 10 years he was refused to make Aliyah, as he was an engineer. And so we were refused until 59. When I was, I think, 8 years old, my father told me, you need to start to prepare for the bar mitzvah. I told him,
8 years old, that's 5 years prior to your bar mitzvah, okay.
I told him, that's a bit early. He said, you need to learn some Hebrew, and in a communist country, the only place you can study Hebrew is at the synagogue, where they prepare you for the bar mitzvah. Otherwise, it's forbidden.
And forgive me for interrupting you. I'm familiar with some of your stories. If I remember correctly, your father was an atheist.
Father was an atheist, but he was a Zionist. And he had very strong Jewish feelings. I was raised by civilizational books about Judaism and history books, not by the Bible. And never...
So this was not about God, it was about the Jewish people.
Exactly.
Okay.
I was never at a synagogue in Romania with my father. The first time I was at a synagogue with him was at my bar mitzvah in Israel already. Anyhow, so I went to the synagogue then, and I was very clear about my Jewish origins, but I felt Romanian. And the family was a very well-rooted family in Romania. The uncle of my grandmother is the one who drew the Romanian flag. He was one of the leaders of the 1848 revolution in Romania, one of the three. Two of them were Jewish, actually. He never declined his Jewish origins, but he changed his name. He Romanized his name from Burach Hiskovich to Barbu Iscovescu. And until now, you can learn about it in history books of Romania. So I'm kind of a descendant of a family which was really rooted in Romanian culture. In 59 we made Aliyah, and we arrived...
You were then what age?
I was almost 12.
Almost 12.
And we arrived in Israel and were placed in a very, very modest apartment in the new neighborhood on the outskirts of Jerusalem, Irganim. And there was, when we arrived, the people saw the place, the new immigrants saw the place, they didn't want to get out of the bus. So my father went down and looked at the apartment. They came back to the bus and said, there is running water. He didn't say that there is no electricity. So the people went down, and when we entered the apartment, he said, here things changed. You are first Jewish and then Israeli. That was the first sentence. So
you're not first
Romanian
and then Jewish. You're first Jewish and then Israeli. Okay.
Exactly. So,
explain.
So I asked him why. We came to Israel to be Israelis. I said, yes, we came to Israel because we wanted to be Jewish first.
Right. We thought that it would be a good idea to speak about your story of immigration, among other things, because, of course, each of these stories is unique, but there are many Israelis who share them. This is a country of immigrants.
Yeah, Shmulik, we differ on many things. We know each other well. You were born here. I think that Israelis who are born in Israel take the sovereignty, the Jewish sovereignty, as a
natural thing, as a given.
Exactly, it's a given. For someone who was raised and born abroad, that's not something that is so simple. In Romania, the time that I grew up, after the Second World War, anti-Semitism was illegal. But still, in many ways, you could feel as a foreigner.
So talk a little more about the differences you see between Israeli-born Jewish Israelis and those who came in. Many hundreds of thousands of people in Israel.
More than many. Right. I tell you that, the difference mainly starts that for people born here to be raised and grow up in a Jewish state is something that they took for granted. The Hebrew language. We had to think why we are doing the move. So there was not an easy life in Romania in the first years of the communist.
Yeah, but Israel of the 50s and the 60s was also a fairly
poor country.
Right.
But there was a push factor. But no doubt that for my parents, for them, the immigration, the Aliyah, was much more difficult than for me. A kid is adapting very fast. For my parents who couldn't go to a concert because they had no money here, they couldn't go to a theater because they couldn't speak understand the language. It was really very...
But this was a country, back then, it was really a country in which almost everybody was an immigrant.
Since the establishment of the state, there were 3.1 million immigrants coming to Israel. Even today, if you look backwards, there are at least 2/3 of the Israeli population is first or second generation of immigrants. And that has a huge impact because that's a feeling that it goes again to the second generation too, that you can't take Jewish sovereignty for granted. You can't take Jewish nationality for granted. We are speaking so much about peoplehood today. In my view, and as actually based on discussions with Professor Jonathan Sarna, peoplehood is a politically correct term for nationality. It means that you feel for your brothers and Jewish brothers and sisters that you have a responsibility towards them. It's arvut adadit. It's a mutual responsibility.
So the book that we published on Israeli Judaism under the auspices of JPPI, the research was funded by JPPI, and you supervised this project from the start. This is a book that describes a young culture, and what you also say, it's not just a young culture, it's even younger because this culture was created by people who came from many different countries, speaking many different languages, having many different sensitivities. So it must take time for this culture to shape up. And what we see today is probably not what we're going to see 50 or 100 years from now, when most Israelis will be third or fourth or fifth generation Israeli born.
Well, in my view, what we call kibbutz galuyot, the gathering of diaspora immigrants, is the biggest success of the country. I was born in Romania. My wife is seventh generation born in Israel. But from my first marriage, I have a son who is half Romanian, half Polish. His mother was born to a couple of Auschwitz survivors. So he carries on his back all the memory.
All the baggage of Eastern Europe and the Holocaust and the experience of immigration.
And two different cultures. The Romanian culture was different than the Polish culture.
Yeah. Which cuisine does he prefer?
Well, the Romanian. But in any case, so now I have two kids from the second marriage who are younger, and they are born to a mother who was born here, and to a father who is an immigrant. They still have the part of the baggage, but the grandkids from my older son, there are a quarter Romanian, a quarter Polish, a quarter Iraqis, and a quarter Moroccans. So that explains everything. And I think that...
and do they carry any baggage, or they just, it's an interesting fact of life, but what they feel like is Jewish Israelis?
They feel as Jewish Israelis, but at the same time, they know all the stories.
Would you say, or would you argue that immigrants who came to Israel from other countries will be more sensitive or more aware of the need to have a strong connection between Israel and Jewish communities abroad? Do you think part of the fact that you established this place, JPPI, to look at the Jewish people as a whole is because of your origins?
No doubt that it had an impact. But my first career was in journalism, and I served in Washington as the bureau chief of Ma'ariv there for
an Israeli newspaper.
For 4 years. And I was amazed not only by the strengths of the Jewish community in the US, but also as the importance of the Jewish community in North America as an asset, a strategic asset for Israel. And I thought that that should be really followed to the future generations.
I'm going to ask you a question that is almost unfair. You said that when you were stationed in Washington and you were watching the American Jewish community, you were amazed by its success and its great achievement. What would your atheist Zionist father tell these Jews they need to do? Would he say, you must go and live in Israel? Or would he say, no, this is a thriving Jewish community, you ought to stay there and develop your own means of Jewish survival?
Well, if you are a Zionist, there is only one way to go. For him, Jewish sovereignty was probably the most important thing and the biggest achievement. He believed that here we are building a strong nation that will encourage others to join us. And I think that if he would live today, he would be more satisfied with the decision he made to move to Israel.
What do Israeli Jews lose when they forget this experience of immigration? They probably lose something.
They lose the feeling of how important is to live in your own place. Where you ask me about what my father will tell to the Americans. You won't tell them what to do.
Oh, of course not.
But I think that there is something that is a special feeling for every Jew who comes to visit here. That's what is so important, and why programs like Taglit, Masa are so important, because it's raising those feelings of belonging as a nation.
But you know that there are Jews today, mostly in North America, who feel very awkward with this notion that Judaism is also a nationality or a belonging to a peoplehood, and they prefer to talk about Judaism more as a religion or a cultural affiliation, not as part of being a nation.
There are things that you have in the front of the head and the back of the hand. Always I felt so. And I think that at the back of the head, the Jewish affiliation exists everywhere. It doesn't mean that they are loyal to Israel. They feel for Israel. And that's critically important.
Do you think that Jews in the world understand that Israel is a country of immigrants and that many of the people who live here today are people who are first or second generation immigrants, and that this has such huge impact on their consciousness and their understandings of the situation and their fears and their hopes for the future?
I don't think they understand it. I don't think that we understand what happens in America. You know, I just came back last week from a 4 days visit in New York and Miami. And in every window, you see a Christmas tree and a Hanukkah. I took pictures. It's amazing. I grew up in Romania with a Christmas tree at home. Now, it was never called the Christmas tree. It was called the winter tree.
But you understand that many Israelis, when they think about a home in which there is both a menorah and a Christmas tree, or a winter tree, whatever you want to call it,
they don't understand
they
it.
feel alienated from it. It's not part of the Jewish Israeli experience.
Of course not. We don't have a winter tree at home today. But I understand those in America who have it.
And that's because you are an immigrant.
Exactly.
Avinam Bar-Yosef, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you both for supporting the work on Israeli Judaism, the research and the study, and for coming here.
Thank you so much.